Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, my name is Donna, and for those of you not new, thank you so much for continuing to come back and support my channel. I appreciate all of you so very much. Today I am doing the next episode of my palette roulette series, in which I let an app choose a palette for me. I utilize that palette throughout the week. I come back to you, I talk to you about my experiences with the palette, show you some pictures, some live swatches, and then we pick a new palette. Today's palette is the ABH Norvina Collection Mini Volume 2. This palette is a great palette. Like, I mean, there's that, right? This is the second, or maybe the third mini that I have utilized. I do have all of the full-size ones that I've also utilized throughout this palette roulette series. My palette roulette series is linked down in the description box for ease of use for finding. You could always go into there, find the other Norvina palettes that I have reviewed during this palette roulette series to see my thoughts on it. I do have some specific thoughts on this palette as well, and we'll go through that obviously, but to start off with, this is the ABH Mini Pro Pigment Palette Volume 2. You guys can see the outside of it is this really beautiful like motif of maybe like a sunset on a boardwalk and some like mountains. I don't necessarily know what, it kind of reminds me of Tron, and this may be aging myself, but you all know I'm in my 40s, so there's that. It's screwing with the white balance on my screen. Do you see how I look like really red right now? Anyways, this is what it looks like. It's really a beautiful palette. The back of it does have like some information regarding the Pro Pigment palette, and then it has like a little layout here, which I'm not sure why they put this on here because these shadows don't have names. They're just like all of her other Pro palettes. They're named A through C, 1 through 3, and that is how it is. So I'm not sure what the layout purposes are on here, but inside you do get a decent sized mirror. It does like lay all the way back. It also like stands up if you want to use it as a vanity mirror. It is kind of small for a vanity mirror, but it is a mini palette. And then this is what that color story looks like. This is kind of a scary color story, honestly, for many people, but I did do this eye look today. I did record most of it. At the end of that recording, I realized that I had forgotten mascara, so I did slap some blue mascara on. I put some orange into the original look just to give it a little bit of a difference coming to this video. So the difference between that video and this video is the mascara, the yellow in the inner corner, and then the orange on the outside. I did use it during that get ready with me that you guys will see in a couple weeks to show the versatility of this palette. It does look a wee bit scary, but you can get some really nice wearable looks out of this palette as well. This palette does come in at 4.4 stars on Sephora with 334 reviews, and it also comes in at 4.5 stars on the ABH website with 149 reviews. This palette wasn't sold at Ulta, so there is no other like rating from Ulta that I could grab for you. It is the Norvina Mini number 2. It does come in at $29 for the overall palette. It has 0.32 ounces of product in it, or each pan being 0.035 ounces of product, which isn't unheard of for ABH. Their pan sizes are a smidge bit smaller than mini that you will find in most palettes. This is a cruelty-free palette, which is nice, and it does have 9 shades in it. 7 of them are matte, 2 of them are shimmers. I do like, for the most part, a 50-50-ish ratio to mattes to shimmers, but I would say that the 2 shimmers in this palette really do cater to all the other mattes in this palette, and it's a good mix. Because it's a mini, because it's 9 pans, you don't want like a 50-50 mix, unless, especially with this color story, let's be honest. Because you want to be able to utilize the palette and get a lot of versatility out of it, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that if they were like mostly shimmers or even a 50-50 mix. If there were 4 shimmers, sure, but if there were 5 shimmers, I could see that being a problem with this palette. This is a limited edition, but it is still for sale, and it was launched last November, so it's been around for about a year now. This was number 8, I believe, in the palettes that was launched by ABH last year during their crazy palette expansion, if you will. And the mattes in this palette are kind of on the drier end. They're not like grippy in the pan, but they are a little bit more dry, which means you're going to find them to be super powdery in the pan. It doesn't bother me, but I do know that it bothers some people. I don't think that it impacts them necessarily, because I find that most ABH shadows are a little bit on the powdery side. A lot of it on the powdery side, and it's totally okay with me. It's not a deal breaker. What I will say is there was a little bit of fallout with this, but not as much as I would have expected with the amount of powderiness that was in the pan. There were some shades in here that of course had a little bit more powderiness than others, and therefore had a lot more fallout than others, but for the most part I experienced fallout, but not as much as I would have anticipated, coming from the knowledge of the powderiness that is in the pans of these shadows. The shimmers in this palette, especially this one here, were really flaky. I saw the most amount of kickback or fallout on my face from this green shimmer here. It is just a little bit flaky. You definitely see a bigger impact with your fingers than you do with any kind of brush, whether it be a stiff brush, a dense brush, a fluffy brush. We all know how I feel about sticking my finger in my makeup, but I did find myself using my finger more often than not with the shimmers in this palette. This one here is the one that is on my lid space today, and it comes off a lot more gold in the eye look than it does look in the pan. In the pan it looks more like champagne-y, and it is listed as a buttery gold. The shadows in this palette definitely work best with a primer. I wouldn't necessarily say that the primer helps with longevity, because these are super pigmented shadows. They're going to be long lasting in your eye looks with or without a primer. I would say that it helps with them going on as smoothly as they can. I found that the creamier, more hydrating version of a primer was best because they are drier in their formulation. It helps with them just go on my eye a little bit more easily, and that is maybe because I have, because I'm in my 40s, I have aging skin and my eyes are a little bit crepey. Not crepey necessarily, but they're definitely not a 20-year-old's eye. So the creamier, more hydrating kind of primer I could put on my eyes, the better when utilizing this palette, which isn't something that I found to be true with other Norvina palettes. So that is standalone for this palette. The longevity of wear, like I said, isn't really impacted wholeheartedly by a primer. Some of them did last longer with a primer than others, but for the most part, many of these shadows are going to last somewhere between 7 and 10 hours for you with or without a primer. This does contain 4 pressed pigment shadows. Again, pressed pigments are categorically not safe for eye use for the most part, and the biggest reason why is because they can cause irritation. They definitely cause staining for the most part. The FDA, says that they're not good for use around the eye. I did use every shade in this palette around my eye. I did suffer from staining, but I didn't suffer from any kind of irritation right off the bat. But I did notice that when I was wearing those colors on my eyes, as the day wore on, as I continued to wear that shadow, particularly on my eye, and especially if I put it on my under eye, my eyes kind of got like bothered, like a little bit tired feeling. Not necessarily itchy, but sore, if that makes any sense. But that can also stem from the fact that I need new glasses. I sit in front of a computer all day. Last week was a hard week for me. There was a lot of computer work that I had to do, and I need new glasses. So I kind of rank it right up there with that as much as I do with the eyeshadows that I am wearing on my eyes. So the pressed pigments in this palette are this A3 and B1 here. Those are two of them. So the two orange shades in here, and then C1 and C2 are the other ones. So this one here and this one here. I found more irritation with my eyes, more soreness with my eyes if I was wearing this one than I did with any of the other ones. And it really kind of shocked me, honestly, that this one was a pressed pigment. I remember looking at the information about this palette to put it into my notes about the shadows and the formulations of the shadows and thinking, wow, that's odd that that's a shimmer and it's a pressed pigment. I usually think of pressed pigments as mattes, but this has a really green base to it, and it's really beautiful. So I guess that base must be the pressed pigment part of it. I'm not 100% sure on that, if I'm being honest. It had a fair amount of staining with certain shades. So like this green here, this orange here, and this pink definitely stained my eyes. I was actually kind of shocked that this green wasn't a pressed pigment because of the amount of staining that I saw from it. I would say that it is the worst one for staining because it took me not 2, face washes, but like maybe even 3 face washes to see all the staining disappear from that green stain, which was interesting. I don't think I've ever seen staining last on my eyes past like washing it off in the evening and then washing my face again in the morning. I've not really ever seen a stain last longer than that second wash. But this green definitely did. This color story definitely reminds me of like tropical vacation vibes. It gives me my Violet Voss Flamingo palette vibes. It interests me that it is like the volume 2 of the mini palettes because it doesn't really remind me a whole lot of the big volume 2, but it doesn't give me fall vibes. It doesn't give me orange or any other color, but it gives me green vibes. There are 3 greens in this palette, so it does give me green vibes. The interesting thing about it is this teal green here has enough blue pigment in it that when mixed with this pink, it does turn purple, which was really amazing because I could make any eye look from this palette when mixing teal and that pink together look like it didn't come from this palette. There's a picture of an eye look in here where I was wearing that green on the outer corner part and then just into the crease part that I don't feel like looks like it came from this palette. It was an all matte look, probably my favorite that came from this palette. I loved that green kind of turned purple when mixed with that pink because it was unexpected. I thought it had more green base in it than it does blue base, but definitely you can see that it definitely has more of a blue base because it definitely turned purple. It's a great palette, I feel like, for 2 color eyeshadow looks. I did do like a green eye. I think that you're just going to see like a picture of just the one eye because I didn't have any of my other makeup on. I took it later in the day, didn't really realize that I looked like hell, but that was just the teal green in the palette and the green shimmer in the palette. I also mixed together like the oranges quite often. I wore this with the brown in the palette, which is what I've got going on today a little bit, and this with the orange in the palette. I found that it was really good for just 2 eyeshadow looks. It's super easy to use in that fashion. The shimmers, like I said, are best with the finger for application, and they are also best when you swipe them on versus pat them on. I especially find that to be true with this green one. If you pat it on, you're going to get kind of more of a topper feel from it than you are opaqueness. It is definitely an opaque shadow when you swipe it on versus when you pat it on. If you just want like a nice sheer wash of the sparkle that comes from it, definitely pat it because then it's going to become more of a topper shade for you. The shades work well together and they definitely blend very well. There's one that I would say doesn't work well with others is this teal right here. In the one eye look that I showed you a picture of that it turned purple, What I found to be true too is that it was lifting whatever color was underneath it. Kind of gives me like subculture vibes a little bit, and or just being vacant in an eye look. The other one that didn't do super well was the green. I did put green in an eye, that green in an eye look with this. So this was all over in the like brow area above the crease area, and then this green was in the crease, and as I was blending it into the crease, it would just kind of void itself. It would just kind of disappear. So it looked really patchy, and that other green did that as well. So I wouldn't say necessarily that those two greens were fantastic. I really did enjoy working with this palette, but I will say that I am happy that we are at a place right now where I get to choose a new palette to work with. This didn't give me as much want, will, and desire to play with my makeup as much as other palettes have in the past, or as much as any of the other Norvina palettes have, to be honest. I am going to go ahead and do the swatches for you guys, and I'm just going to go like row A, row B, row C, so that it's super easy. I'm going to try and fit them all onto one hand. All right, so these are the first three shades here. They are the pastel-y of the shades. This yellow here is my inner corner. I found it to be an amazing inner corner color. It's also kind of in my brow bone area. It's buffed in really well with a really super fluffy brush, so you can't hardly tell, but I just was using it to really buff out that brown. So these are the three first shades. We have first A1, which is a matte pale yellow. Then we have A2. A2 was the worst shade for texture. It was also one of the worst for patchiness. This green shade really shows your texture, like really shows texture a lot. So if you have aging eyes, this is probably not the shadow to use on you, but I have found that to be true in a lot of more pastel shades. So there's that. And A3 is this pastel like orange. They call it a matte cantaloupe shade, which it kind of does look like a cantaloupe actually now as I'm thinking about it. This one was actually the easiest one to use. I feel like it has a little bit more of a satin touch to it than it does a matte touch to it. It just has a little bit of sheeniness that kind of appears in an eye look as well. I remember when I put it into the upper portion of my eye, so close to the brow bone, thinking, wow, that's kind of sheeny. I don't like wearing like sheeny shades above my lid because I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm too old for that. So those are the first three shades. That is row A. These are row B right here. And so the first one that you have is a nice bright matte orange. This is the most hardiest of the colors. This one also did leave a stain. It feels just a little more dense than the other ones do, and I think that you guys can see that in the swatch. It's not patchy. It's not, I love oranges and pinks on my eyes. I really did like this color. It is kind of buffed into the outer V of my eye look today. It could look dirty, it could look grungy, it could look bright. It was a good color to use. The second shade in that row is that one there, which is the shade that is all over my lid, and this is kind of a metallic champagne gold that really gets gold on the eye. It's got more of a warm tone to it as a gold, and it definitely gives you kind of like a frosty appearance. So it as well is not going to be spectacular for texture on your eye. It's going to show some texture. The next shade is this one here, which is the teal, the matte dark teal. This one was, like I said, the worst for playing with others. It is hardy. It does show up really well in the swatch. It swatches so great, but it doesn't work well with others. It does pick up other shades underneath it. It is one that likes to void itself out if blended too extensively. So you're going to see that it looks patchy in your eye look, and you guys can see that both that orange and that teal did stain my fingers. These are the third row, so third and last row in the palette. Really beautiful colors here. This one here is the only one in the palette that really feels grippy in the pan. The rest of them do feel very nice and buttery soft in the pan. The first one is this one here, which is a matte fuchsia. This one was probably the longest lasting in any eye look, and it did leave a stain behind. The second one is this green, which is a really beautiful metallic green gold. It is very loosely pressed though, so the fallout for that shade in particular is pretty substantial. And then the last one in the palette is that C3. It is a matte like mauvey brown. And I really liked that shade. I felt like I could use that shade the most. It's got enough of the brown to it that it can help you make any eye look in this palette really look more everyday for you. And you guys can see that pink really intensified the already orange stained finger. These are my 3 stained fingers from giving you the swatches from this palette. I would say that most of them, like I said, felt super buttery soft in the pan. That mauvey brown on the end there at the top is the only one that kind of felt grippy in the pan. And the color story of this palette, I would say, is, I think you can also see in the swatches, it's pretty cohesive, even though it looks kind of scary at first glance in the pan. I think it's a rough palette to work with if you don't have like some kind of color theory behind you though, because just the color story is a little bit odd. But come on, we're talking about Norvina creating colors and color stories in palettes, and Norvina is kind of an eccentric kind of person, and I love it. I love every minute of it, but this is her baby. This is her brainchild, and I think that she did a really good job with it. You guys can see my hand is stained. I think that she did a really good job of it. What I will say is this is probably not my favorite ABH Norvina Mini. I think that I could have maybe even done without this in my collection, but then I would feel like I was missing out on something. You know, I watched a friend of mine do a tutorial using this palette and then was like, I have to have that palette. And so I got it. But I'm glad that I paid $14 for it versus the $29, because I'm not sure that I love it for $29. I definitely love it for $14, but I'm not sure that I love it for $29. I think that there's some interesting eye looks that you can get out of this. I know looking it up, there were some interesting eye looks that I saw. I know that I also created some interesting eye looks with it. I think that it's an easy palette to use because you can get quite a few like 2-color eye looks out of it. If you're into a mostly matte eye, you can definitely do an all matte eye and still come out with a beautiful eye look from this palette. There are quite a few shades in here that aren't very nice to those of us with texture on our eyes. They definitely just exacerbate your texture. I got bored with it really easy. So there's that. With that, I would love to pull a palette for next week. We do utilize an app that I pulled from the Play Store. I do have an Android phone. I have a Samsung Note 9. I do know that you can pull these kind of apps though from the iOS system as well. So this is the app that I use. It is called the Decide Now app, and I have all of my palettes in this wheel. I put all of them in when we started this journey. As we get new palettes, I do put them into the wheel, and as we utilize them through palette roulette or I declutter them for whatever reason, I do pull them out of the wheel. And to spin the wheel and pick a new palette, we just press the blue button there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we have the BH Cosmetics Avocado Toast palette. That is the one that we are pulling for next week. So I'm going to go get that and I will be right back. All right, folks, this is the BH Cosmetics Avocado Toast palette. And this is actually a fairly new palette to my collection. I think I hauled it in October. And this is what it looks like. I'm actually excited to use it. BH Cosmetics is a cosmetics company that I kind of slept on for a long time. And then finally I think I had like a couple of palettes from them that were just, I liked, but like I didn't like enough to like stand the brand. And then my friend Lisa could not stop talking about the Zodiac palette. I listened to her talk about the Zodiac palette for like a year, maybe even a year and a half. And then I finally purchased it myself, and that was the turnaround point for me. And now it's like, oh, BH Cosmetics is amazing. This palette I picked up more recently. I think it is fairly new-ish to their line. They have this one, and then they have a Belgian waffle and a blueberry muffin and all kinds of stuff. I love avocado toast. I've recently started really digging greens. And the one thing that I can say is a bummer is that I just had a palette that had quite an extensive green array in it, but secondarily, like, I love BH Cosmetics. I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. It does have a lot of browns and some yellows and some nice neutral tones in it as well. I think I can get a lot of great eye looks out of this. It does have quite a few shimmers in here, so I'm actually kind of excited to use this over the next 2 weeks and come back to you and talk to you about my feelings on the palette. I hope that you guys are excited about it as well. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope that you're considering giving it a big thumbs up. It really does help our channels out here, and it's totally free to do. I also hope that you liked it, or me, enough that you're considering subscribing to my channel before you go. I would definitely love to have you along for this crazy ride of mine, part of my grand YouTube family here, and get to like really, you know, banter with you back and forth in the comments section. Even if you don't subscribe, I would love to hear from you down in the comments section. If you do subscribe, I would hate for you to miss anything, and that notification bell is going to make sure that you don't. Tons of free content coming to you every single week. I do uploads 3 to 4 times a week, and I am doing Vlogmas this year. So I have some really great collabs in the works, but I will be bringing you a video every single day throughout the month of December because I just enjoy it. I'm not here making any money from it. I know a lot of YouTubers do it because they make a lot of money from it. I'm not monetized, so that's not me. I'm doing it surely because I love it. Thank you guys so much for coming to watch my video today. I know that you don't have to. It warms my heart so very much that you're choosing to come and watch me when I upload content. It keeps me humble. I love having you guys here so very much. I hope that you guys are staying safe out there. I hope that this finds you well, finds your month well. We're moving into, this is Thanksgiving week, so I hope that your Thanksgiving is amazing. I hope that you're wearing your masks when you're out there in public to keep yourself safe, if not for any other reason. We never know who's walking out around out there with a mask off, asymptomatic, spreading their germs to everybody on the planet. Wash your hands, wear your mask, stay safe, please love each other, but love each other from afar. And until next time, bye.